Okay, so welcome to your pre-work on book 2. I'm going to have a look at page 23 and covering the 4 main areas. Now, the first bit, the key events, that's going to be done either in the lesson that we've already covered or in a lesson coming up. So you can cover the key events based on the storyboards that you've done yourself in the lesson. We're going to focus on the other 3 things. And the first of those is the Roman context. Now, we've got 3 interesting, quite small points, but nevertheless useful ones on Roman context from Book 2. Firstly, it's line 289, the appearance of Hector when Aeneas is running through the streets of Troy, trying to massacre everybody that he can possibly find. And he bumps into Hector, and Hector tells him that he's got to take the household gods and establish Rome. He says, look for a great city to establish for them after long wanderings across the sea. So actually, Hector's sending Aeneas away, showing him that it's not his duty or responsibility to stay and fight, but to go away and serve the city another way. And it's interesting that he gives him the goddess Vesta. He brought out in his own hands, this is line 297, from her inmost shrine, the mighty goddess Vesta, with the sacred ribbons on her head and her undying flame. Now, you may have heard the Vestal Virgins. There's a TED-Ed on the Vestal Virgins, which you might like to watch. The goddess Vesta is the goddess of hearth, home, and family. And she's served by the Vestal Virgins. So she represents home. And Aeneas is given her to take away. And the Romans will venerate Vesta very, very seriously in future years. So there's the first little link to Roman context. Secondly, it's Anchises in line 700. Now, Anchises is refusing to leave Troy. He says he's an old guy, he doesn't want to leave, and it takes a sign of Ascanius' hair going on fire, and then a prayer from Anchises when he prays to Jupiter, and he receives a peal of thunder and a star falling from the sky that Jupiter sends. Now, this may well be a reference to the comet that was seen at the funeral of Julius Caesar, and which led to Julius Caesar being hailed as a god. So that idea of a star shooting across the sky, again, maybe a little bit of Roman context. And then finally, there's Creusa, Aeneas' wife, in line 780. She prophesies the exact spot the Trojans will land in Italy. She says, where the Lydian river Thybris flows with smooth advance. Now, the Thybris is the Tiber, and that's the river of Rome. So here we have a specific reference again to Rome itself, and the Tiber being the place that the Trojans should settle. So there's a few little bits on Roman context. Now, just to place that into its broader setting, let me just remind you again of the 5 key passages on the Romans which we need to know. The Neptune simile we talked about before, and Jupiter's prophecy we talked about before. Neptune simile being about Augustus bringing calm after civil war. Jupiter prophesying the history of the great Roman founders all the way down through Romulus and Remus to Augustus. In Book 6, we're going to come across the parade of future heroes of Rome, where all the characters of Roman history appear. And in Book 8, we're going to see the events of Roman history on the shield of Aeneas, which you will become familiar with. And then finally, in Book 12, there's going to be an argument amongst the gods where the final deal that's cut is that the Romans will be Latin speakers, even though they may be of Trojan origin. So that explains why the linguistic thing is there. And then finally, there's a bit in line 851, 852 of Book 6. And it's an instruction to Aeneas. Your task, Roman, and do not forget it, will be to govern the peoples of the world in your empire. So that's the Romans' job. They have to govern the peoples of the world. These will be your arts, and to impose a settled pattern upon peace, to pardon the defeated and war down the proud. And there's the way to do it. Impose a settled pattern on peace. If people surrender to you, you pardon the defeated. If they don't surrender to you, war down the proud. So there's a little Roman context addition. It's not Book 2, but it's just to remind you of those key bits. Now, in terms of the style and narrative techniques, there's this great incident, and you can see the picture here, of Aeneas carrying his father on his back, the household gods in his hand, and leading his son with his poor wife Creusa left kind of trailing behind, and as a result she gets lost. What's significant about it? Well, firstly, he's the pater patriae, he's the father of the nation. He takes the household gods with him, and the past future of Anchises and Ascanius. Anchises being the one who represents the past, Ascanius representing the future. But the household gods are the past. He also demonstrates his pietas. I bowed down and took up my burden. So he's taking Anchises, the current last generation of the Trojans, and then he's the pater familias. He's taking the future, but remember, it's only men who are significant, so he's only taking his son by the hand. He's not holding his wife's hand, because for the Romans, it's the male line that's significant. So that's the style, narrative techniques thing, that image of departure, really, really significant and very, very useful as he leaves. And then the final box is the character developments. Now, this may not quite fit inside your box, so you may want to have this on a little different paper, summarize it later. When Aeneas starts Book 2, he thinks he's a warrior. He thinks he's in command of soldiers. He's very responsible for the city. And he thinks, therefore, that it's his job to die in battle. And there's even a reference to him waking up and suddenly realizing the city's under attack. And line 349, you are the bravest of all our warriors. Your bravery is in vain. If your desire is fixed to follow a man who fights to the end, you see how things stand with us. Let us die. Let us rush into the thick of the fighting. That's his understanding at this point, despite the fact that Hector's already told him to clear off. And that is because he's following the kind of Greek heroism of Kleos, isn't it? He thinks it's all about gaining immortal glory for yourself in battle and dying in battle. What then happens is, by following that, he is engaged in furor, fury, or irrational passion. He can't control himself. And so as he charges out into battle, he eventually, having killed large numbers of Greeks, he finds Helen. And Helen, of course, is the one who has caused the war by her affair, and she is standing there. I caught sight of Helen keeping watch on the doors of the Temple of Vesta, where she was staying quietly in hiding. This Helen, this fury sent to be the scourge of both Troy and of her native Greece, was afraid of the Trojans, and so what he says to himself is, "I'm going to kill her, and revenge the city for Helen's behaviour." Just as he's about to do that, Venus appears and rebukes him for raging passion and for neglecting his family. And she tells him to clear off. "Escape, my son, escape with all haste," she says. She shows him that furor and kleos is not what he should be doing. And so he's pushed into a refugee status instead of a warrior status. And once his duty to flee is confirmed by the omen of Iülus' hair or Ascanius' hair alight, the family departs. And after discovering Creusa's dead, she confirms his destiny. It is to remarry and move on. And so he knows his pietas, his duty. So that's an interesting character development for Aeneas, isn't it? He moves from being a warrior to being a refugee. He moves from pursuing kleos into pietas. Now, this is not resolved. He's got a lot of work still to do, but that's the basic sense and meaning of what goes on in Book 2.